Well, I'm Bob Dickey, and welcome to another episode of Taking the Leap podcast. My guests today are Cody Newton and Dr. Douglas Cleveland. Cody Newton is a serial entrepreneur, having started or been involved in over 20 different companies, to include the professional sports industry, franchising, direct sales, and the energy markets. He is dedicated to democratizing renewables, carbon credits, and recycling for home and business owners in his latest project with Carbon X Solutions. Dr. Douglas Cleveland is a trained anesthesiologist from the University of Chicago with a medical economics certificate from the Harvard Business School. Doug is also an entrepreneur with expertise in process and operational efficiencies, and shares Cody's passion about the energy and renewable space and the impact it can have on the environment. I found this story fascinating about how two entrepreneurs with vastly different backgrounds saw the same problem and figured out a way to complement each other with their diverse approach to business as they built a team and tackled a problem that many experts said was impossible. This conversation will highlight the complexities and challenges of starting a new venture when everyone around you says it can't be done. If there's one thing that I've learned from all these interviews, it's that entrepreneurs almost always have to defy the odds and many naysayers along the way to launch a product or service that is new, innovative, and world-changing. I know you'll learn a lot from this conversation, so let's jump right in. Cody Newton and Douglas Cleveland, thank you for taking time to be with us this afternoon. Certainly looking forward to this episode. Now, Cody, you had an opportunity to be with me back in the very early days of this podcast, so we got to know a little bit about your entrepreneurial journey. But Doug, this is your first time on, and I'm really excited to be able to peel back the layer of the onion here, so to speak. And I want to ask you guys questions about your entrepreneurial journey and how you guys meet in this new initiative, this new company that you guys have started, Carbon X Solutions, and what you guys are doing in the green technology and the green revolution space. But you both have a very different career path when it comes to your entrepreneurial journey. I'd like to just take a quick moment to unpack that. And so, Doug, why don't we start with you and tell us of how you got involved in some of your entrepreneurial pursuits, because you didn't start that way, right? I mean, you're a trained doctor, you're a physician, and yet you're a businessman and an entrepreneur to boot. So tell us a little bit about that.
All right. Well, first off, Bob, thanks for having us on your podcast here.
Yeah.
It's an honor to be here. I am a practicing anesthesiologist. I went to medical school and did a residency in anesthesiology, and I've been practicing for 20 years now. But I'm a restless kind of guy, and always looking for something new. I love to learn, and always looking for something new to learn about.
So did you, medicine wasn't enough to get you excited and keeping this lifelong journey of medicine? I mean, that seems like it's a pretty daunting task in of itself. And along the line, with everything else that's going on in life, you're just like, hey, I want to continue to learn, but put my pursuits in a different direction. Also do startup world and entrepreneurial world and investing and all this kind of thing.
Yeah, so there is some effort involved in keeping up with medicine, but once you've been doing it for 20 years, it becomes fairly routine, not always, but mostly routine, and you keep up your education that way. But a couple of years ago, I started a real estate venture with a couple friends and had some pretty good success there. And with the changes in the market, was kind of wrap that up, and with some changes in the market, decided to do something other than real estate for a little while. And my wife was at a basketball practice with Cody, and they were talking about Cody's idea to start this company. And my wife came home and said, you got to talk to this guy. He's legit. He is really legit. I talked to him about this opportunity. And so, I kind of try to get Cody to start talking about it with me a little bit more, and had some great conversations, tremendous respect for Cody and his vision in this space.
Well, I think that's high praise from your wife. I know a little of her background as well, and she's a not only Harvard undergrad, but Harvard Law and spent time at McKinsey, which is, with the gold standard when it comes to consulting. So for her to come home and say, hey, this guy's legit, I mean, it definitely got your attention. And I heard about the conversation that you guys had. But this is what's really fascinating for me, because I know your background, I know Cody's background, right? So you guys come at the entrepreneurial journey from two totally different vectors, if you will. I mean, you've gone on this very prestigious track of college and then medical school and then all these other secondary schools and various education. And so just so the audience understands, where did you get your various degrees in your professional training?
Went to undergraduate at Valparaiso and then medical school in Indiana. And then I did my training in anesthesiology at the University of Chicago. And for a few years, I did some consulting also on the side, which I didn't mention earlier, on how to make operating rooms safer for patients and to improve financial performance for hospitals. And so I did some work at Harvard Business School as well to augment my offerings in that space.
Well, this is what how I find this relationship so fascinating, because Cody, I want to segue over to you. You come at it from a completely different perspective, or different pathway. You're more along the lines of the Steve Jobs, Bill Gates. Let me think of how many others I can think of. Those are the two that come off that strike me off the top of my head. But this entrepreneur that goes to college and says, "Hey, you know what? I don't think I want to do this. I'm just going to strike out on my own. I'm going to quit college and just start building my business." And you did that at a very early age. So why don't you walk us through Cody Newton as a youngster that shows up at Kansas State and decides, you know what, this isn't for me. I'm just going to go be an entrepreneur and do it that way.
Yeah, I appreciate it. And Dr. Doug, that was some nice stuff you were saying about the beginning of this. But we do come from different backgrounds and different spots. I went to small Kansas farm town. Family did farming and construction and all that kind of stuff. Ended up starting to flunk out of high school. So they said, hey, if you don't want to flunk out, you can go work at Heston Concrete half the day and then go to school half the day. And then we can probably get you to where you can get a 2.0. And so did that for the end of my high school career. So I did graduate. In fact, my wife and I saw the teacher that I had, and I'm not going to say his name, but it was my senior year of freshman algebra.
Okay.
And he was my algebra teacher, and it was right before my senior year. I was taking freshman algebra my senior year, and he left the algebra, the answer book open in his office. And he left the room, and he said, hey, there's a book in my office you got to check out. That's how I passed freshman algebra my senior year. And I saw him the other day, and he continues to shake his head because he just, he's like, I gave you a shot and you took it with reckless abandonment. Yeah. And he said, it turned out for you all right. And
so this was before, like, you had a cell phone. Like nowadays, if you did that, a kid could go in there, take a quick picture of it. You had everything. So did you literally have to like go into this room and just like sit there and just start writing stuff down?
I was flopping through pages.
Okay. This is what they're going to be covering on the quiz, on the test.
Yeah, and I wrote the answers on my. There used to be a thing called biker shorts. You guys remember biker shorts?
Oh, well, yeah. It's not. It used to be a thing. That's still a thing. Biker shorts is you wear that when you're biking, right?
I know, but I mean, they used to wear them underneath shorts. So you would wear like basketball shorts with biker shorts underneath them.
Yeah.
I think they still do that, but
okay, well, you shouldn't do that now. They should have just done it back in the day.
Well, no, you're not supposed to wear just biker. Like if I just went to the mall with biker shorts on, you shouldn't do that. But I think wearing biker shorts underneath shorts, I think you can still do that.
Okay, well, whatever you think. Underneath my biker shorts, I would pull the biker shorts up, and that's where I would write the answers on my leg. So I could pull the biker shorts back down, get to the room, pull the biker shorts up a little bit, and they'd have all the answers. So it was just an easy kind of a way to do it. But anyways, went to college, studied microeconomics, and speech, and made it 3 weeks and had a 24%, I think. And both of my teachers said it's just ain't for you. And so ended up starting an entrepreneurial career. Started in construction, which is what I learned in high school and stuff like that. And so started a career of that, then to arena football teams, into real estate, into leasing companies. And then as of lately, it's kind of turned into about 2 or 3 years ago, actually a few years ago. And I'm trying to remember the exact date. We ended up starting some recycling companies. And then how we kind of got in the green space a little bit would be ended up getting pitched an idea of renewable natural gas in taking cows in the dairy farms, and instead of them putting their what do they call them? What's the proper way to say their feces? But there's a
Manure? Is it the manure?
Yeah, they don't. There's actually an excrement or something like that. They call it. What is it called, Doug? You're smart enough to know that word.
Animal science isn't my thing. I can learn about it later, but not.
All right. Well, anyways, they had this project where they could take it, instead of going to the lagoon, they could cover it with a digester and turn it into renewable natural gas. And so I came onto that project a few years back, and then started another recycling company. So I kind of started to understand this space, and that's kind of how we got here a little bit. So
that's fascinating. One of the things that, I've had a previous conversation with you on this, where you and I, as friends outside this podcast, we're talking about I think the importance today of not just having deep domain experience, but rather having a breadth of experience, and that some of the biggest breakthroughs and the biggest opportunities are going to be with individuals who have breadth of experience that span multiple industries, and then being able to connect the dots and see where opportunity lies. And you were kind of sharing with me your journey and where you were able to, because you had your foot in 2 or 3 different entrepreneurial pursuits, and all of a sudden you started connecting the dots, be like, hold on a second. I can take this piece here in this industry, connect it to this piece here, and all of a sudden you started seeing how there was this unique opportunity that nobody else saw because of your breadth of experience. Doug, have you ever been in your career, have you been able to do that as well? What's your take on this? You weren't a part of this conversation, but I'd like to get your insight on this. Does that statement in terms of breadth versus depth, does that resonate with you? Because then when I take a look at a doctor, right? So doctors are trained as an anesthesiologist. You have deep domain experience in this area where you're an expert, right? But now you've also, through your entrepreneurial pursuits, are having some breadth as well. So you kind of have both. Does that statement resonate with you? Or are we onto something, or is that off base?
No, I totally agree. It's interesting when you're in medicine, you are in these sort of silos, right? You're an anesthesiologist, and then what kind of anesthesiologist are you? You're cardiac, you pediatric, you do OB, So everybody is super specialized in that way. Or you're a cardiologist, or you're not just a general surgeon, but you're a thoracic surgeon, or everyone's more and more and more these days. People are becoming more and more specialized, mm-hmm. and in picking out a niche for themselves in which to work. And when you get out in the business world, it's a little different. How many business books have you read where Apple hires somebody from Target, an executive from Target to come over, or from a completely unrelated industry? Mm-hmm. And I think the people skills that good business people have are sort of a universal thing that you can no matter what industry you're working in business, that always translates over, right? Mm-hmm. Being able to read financial statements and those sorts of things. It's different industry, but it's a lot of the same stuff across different industries. And I honestly, Bob, I think that's part of the draw to doing this is mm-hmm. that you kind of see a lot of common threads, no matter what industry you're working in. And I enjoy it very much.
Because as you're sharing this with me, I remembered a quote that I've heard so many times from various, mentors and people in different circles. Riches are in niches, right? So you've got that's one area where people will focus on. Hey, just get super smart in one area, be the subject matter expert here, and this is where you're going to have great success. And then yet you and Cody, and I would say there's many others in my life that have been demonstrating this over the last decade. They may have deep domain experience in one area, but also have a breadth of experience, and then have been able to see something that others don't, connect those dots. In your journey, are there certain things, like as you guys got together? I want to talk a little bit about this chance encounter and how you guys started this friendship and company. But leading up to this point, let's say we've got a younger audience. Maybe let's say we've got business school students who are listening in. What are there a few things that you learned in your career that you would say, man, this was gold? These some of these early lessons that I learned in my business career, my medical career, it helped me in outsized ways. And I wish I would have known this at the very beginning. If I knew then what I know now, this would have sped up my entrepreneurial, my journey.
I would say, even working with Cody has been really fantastic. Honestly, he's obviously quite a smart guy, quite accomplished in entrepreneurship. Talking to him about people and talking to him about strategy and things have really, frankly, changed my mind about a lot of the things that I used to do, or the way that I used to think about a lot of things.
Mhm.
And so it's been really a great experience so far. So I'm really, really happy to have the time that I have with Cody. He's a busy guy.
Yeah.
And we spend a lot of time on the phone each week, and then we cool off a little bit, and then it's back on again. But I think Cody's been a wonderful mentor in many ways in this business that we've started. The business that I ran before this in real estate, again, a lot of people skills that I learned, and
Mhm.
how to get people to see things a little bit differently. I am reading the Steve Jobs biography right now,
Oh,
and
it's fast. Yes,
he's a good example of a lot of things not to do.
right.
And but he's a good example of to have a vision, and stay true to the vision that you have,
Mhm.
but find ways to manage the people that are helping bring you along to that vision in positive ways. And so I have tremendous respect for Steve Jobs and what he's accomplished. I mean, I think, people wise, his skills obviously could have been a lot better along the way, but he didn't compromise on the vision, though. And I like that about him.
One of the things I loved about that book, and I'm sure you're referencing the Walter Isaacson, Steve Jobs book, is that you do see a little bit of a story arc of how he changes as a human being, how he softens, how he becomes a better version of himself through life and trial and error. And I think that's the story that all of us are on, hopefully, right, as we're getting better each and every day. Certainly you have some very kind words there with Cody, and my friendship with Cody over the years, I would echo that as well. So Cody, over to you to ask you the exact same question, right? So now here you are, mid 40s, you've launched many entrepreneurial companies and pursuits, and you're in the process of launching Carbon X solutions in the green technology space and dealing with carbon credits and a very complex global marketplace. But before you and Dr. Cleveland get into the specifics of that, I mean, just recounting all the various things that you've learned up to this particular point. And Doug was referencing just a moment ago, just the importance of relationships, right? And you and I have heard so many times, business is simple. It's all about people. It's all about relationships. But that same question to you, what are some of the things that maybe you learned in your career leading up to this point that you would share with young people and say, these are key lessons. These things have really helped me get to this point right now in my career?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think I've started either or partially and 29 companies, 30 companies maybe. And I think I did them all at the beginning for reasons. There was reasons, but I don't know if they were the right reasons. And
it's interesting.
And I think that I saw something and I thought, oh, I could do it better. I could do it like this. I could tweak it like this, and I could do something better. I think that's kind of how I got started. I saw something. I'm like, all you got to do is this, and it'll be a little bit better. And what that got me into, and a lot of times people say, well, man, you've been an entrepreneur. You've done all this kind of stuff. And but I got myself into messes plenty of times. Because we have 5 kids. We got, I was telling Tara the other day, we had 5 kids, 9 companies, and 12 sports going on all at one time, right? And so I got myself into a spot where there might have been a lot of stuff happening and moving, but I don't know if I was creating significance. And I don't know if I was creating fulfillment. And I would beg the 20-year-old Cody to ask himself probably a couple questions that I didn't ask myself at the time. And one is kind of how when Doug and I first met, what I noticed about Doug right away is he had a tremendous amount of clarity in the complex, which is very few times when you start going through something, you find somebody who has a lot of clarity in complex situations. And then his ability to sift through information to get the noise out. And to go to actually a result, not just sift through information to be an intellect, but sift through it to get a result. And I love that about him. But the question I'd ask him at the beginning is, are you a finisher? Will you finish? Right? It might not have been directly to him, but he knew that's somewhat the questions we were like, can they finish? And I'd say this, that I wish I would have asked myself at the beginning is what this pursuit that I'm going to start, am I going to finish? And the second thing is, why am I going to finish? And that's by asking yourself, I think a question that, one of the things, they say a lot of times, Bob, you've written about this in your book and your book and your podcast, you're talking about passion and finding stuff that motivates you. And I think if you ask yourself the question, what breaks my heart? And then try to fix those things that might break your heart a bit in the business and make sure that business can do that. I would have probably thought through it that way more than, oh my gosh, I saw them pour concrete. I can pour concrete just as good as they can. I can lease homes just as well as they can. I can do this. I can tweak these little pieces. I think I would have probably gone for more of a foundational. What do I want to finish? Because it's going to break my heart if it doesn't get finished. So that's just a couple of insights over 23 years of being a business owner.
I love how you spoke about the complex and the simple. It's like you can talk about, if you talk about things that are complex, you can sound really smart. But the people who can take the complex and make it really simple, that's where you make a lot of money.
Yeah. And that's what we call him Doug, but it's Dr. Douglas Cleveland. And you have to kind of straighten your tie when you say it.
I've noticed that a couple of times. I've been calling him Doug and I've been like, oh, I'm going to get admonished for not. Some doctors have to take that very seriously. No. I'm Dr. Douglas Cleveland.
But Dr. Douglas I call him Doug. So I'm going to call him Doug the rest of this time. But Doug isn't like that. Doug's ability to be somewhat like a private investigator for not just investigative purposes, but for actual outcomes that can produce a result for a lot of different people is just it's very rare. When I met him, I had expected him to have a level of understanding. I mean, Harvard Business School, Chicago, Pittsburgh, whatever, anesthesiologist. He's well known in town as being my neighbor is an anesthesiologist actually in his clinic, which we had no clue about. And so he was well known there, but when I met with him, I found out that he was able to kind of formulate it in a way that could use some private investigation style, some education style, and to sift through so much noise for that simplicity, I knew we were onto something big, because it took a lot more than just a bulldog of an entrepreneur. It took a guy like Doug to take this to fruition, and a bunch of other people as well.
Well, you guys are sharing a lot of really interesting things about your entrepreneurial journey. It brings us right up to the present day. I want to dive deep into this new business that you guys have started and what you've seen. But just to recap what I'm hearing, I mean, it sounds like it is the prototypical entrepreneurial pursuit. You guys have deep domain experience in key areas, but also breadth of experience, connecting all these dots. I love the fact, Cody, you highlighted Doug's ability to be a little bit of almost like a private investigator, to be able to see things, research things, bring all this. And that's so much of the entrepreneurial journey, right? You're just constantly, you're looking for where this place of opportunity is. You're looking for the things that are broken that need to get fixed, and how can we do it better to serve customers and clients. So why don't you share, Cody, Doug, whoever wants to lead here, on what exactly how did you guys stumble across carbon credits? And there's so much talk about ESG and the various mandates, and you see it in the news all the time that the world, countries, companies, they're trying to reduce their carbon footprint, trying to have a cleaner environment. We see the benefits, obviously, of that. All the great work that the current presidential candidate, Robert Kennedy Jr., did. He's an environmental lawyer, spent a vast majority of his career helping clean up the Hudson and all sorts of places. And you see what happens when we protect the environment, clean the environment, and fisheries come back and forests grow and thrive. So what is it exactly that you guys saw, and how are you wanting to participate in this green movement? Not just for the benefit of the environment, but also, I know both of your passions on this is that you want to help business owners and homeowners be able to participate in this movement.
Yeah, I can kind of get us to where we started, and then I'll let Doug kind of take over in making the complex simple. But it started a few years back. I had been a part of a company that was going to do renewable natural gas in Mexico, and so they had hollered at me about helping fund and find funding for a 30,000 head dairy farm in right around Jalisco, Mexico. Which Jalisco is a state there that's where you see your guava plants and all that kind of stuff there.
Premium tequilas, is that what you're telling me?
Premium tequilas, yes.
All right, now we're talking.
Now we're talking, and so we started looking at it, started looking at the pro formas of it, and so I ended up flying to Mexico. I landed in Leon, Mexico. Then we drove up to Jalisco and saw the farms and the guava plants. Stayed in some of the haciendas, some really cool places there, and saw how this whole thing was produced from the dairy cattle to how their waste was pushed into the middle, and it was washed out into the lagoon. It was covered over the top of the digester, and then you would separate the natural or the methane from the CO2, and they would put that methane. They would compress it into CNG, and they would put it back into the grid. And it's a long process. I'm not going to get into it how it exactly works. But I spent a lot of time there, and then I started looking at the pro forma with it. And what I had noticed was the compressed natural gas that we were putting back into the grid, which was allowing a greener gas, a healthier way to sustain the environment. It's something that was already being used anyways. It might as well be used for production of energy. When I saw that, I also noticed on the pro forma the part that was set up for the renewable natural gas credits at the time. And when I saw those things that were in that thing, made that business opportunity a great business opportunity. I had recommended, and we were launching that thing as we speak. But when I saw that, I wondered, because we had just started a solar company before that. And so I wondered if there was any way that could be allowed in, for solar projects. And I come to find out, I came back to the States, did some investigation, found out that there was a chance to do that. And there was some companies that were trying to do that when you had big megawatt systems, big 1,000-panel systems up. And
that would be for like if you're driving down 75, like I've done, going down to Florida or so forth, and you see like these huge solar farms, just like it seems like for miles, right? These big solar arrays. Those are the large projects you're referencing, right?
Yes, and I think it gets back to what I was talking about earlier. When you ask yourself, what breaks your heart? Like what's something that when you see it, you can't unsee, right? When I read that performa, I could never unread that performa, right? When I saw what was happening there, I couldn't unsee it. I couldn't feel what it was like to think about. Like when I came back and I saw that, if you have thousands of panels, you can do it. I started calling attorneys. Now, this is a couple years back or whatever now. I started calling attorneys to see how we can get that space into small and medium-sized businesses. Why can't the average person do this? So I think there was probably, before we got started, there was really three things that questions that I couldn't get answered that I really kind of bothered me, I guess, a little bit, or broke my heart, or it's just not right. There's a book, I'm trying to remember, Janine Maxwell wrote a book called It's Not Okay With Me. And I think somewhat my business philosophy has been now is more, if it breaks my heart and it's not okay with me, we're going to go find a way.
Help connect the dots for me in terms of it breaking your heart, because I don't know if you have clearly stated, like you said, you saw the performa, you see this happening, but like, why is it breaking your heart that you're not able to do this on smaller, medium-sized businesses? I don't know if I understand that just yet.
Well, okay, so I think there's probably three things that I thought about that I wrote down when I was leaving that. I wrote down, why in the heck can't any small businesses or aren't any small systems able to utilize this?
You're talking green carbon credits and stuff like that.
Green credits for the solar space,
okay.
Or even small renewable places.
Okay.
I wrote back, why in the HELL is actually what I wrote. Can't small and medium size. I came from a small Kansas farm as a small Kansas farm kid. I came from a family that worked hard, did everything they could to get where they wanted to go. And there always was some kind of intervention by something else that kind of affected our life. And there was always somebody trying to bully. And I think I've somewhat devoted the philosophy as you go bully the bully. And when I saw that there was no small and medium-sized companies that were utilizing this typically. Now there was a few, but virtually no small ones. The other question I'd asked myself was that just kind of bothers me a little bit. So one is that small and medium sized can't, because I came from a small and medium sized family business.
So these were benefits that larger companies were able to utilize. They were able to sell their green credits back, and it was a secondary source of revenue for them, or a way in which they could participate in some tax credits. But you saw that as, here's this benefit that these large multinationals are able to enjoy. But if I put solar on my family farm, or if I had solar on my family home, I'm not able to participate in those same benefits.
Yeah, or is virtually too complex that it couldn't.
Okay.
So that was one of them. I would say the other thing is that it seems to me in life and in business that when rules change in business, like when all of a sudden now that there's ability to sell credits or any of these renewable spaces, when these rules start to change, it gets very quiet and complex for the small and middle-sized entrepreneur. By complex, it means extremely complex. By quiet, I mean no one's heard about it. No, it's like, and even the noise is wrong inside of it. And so at that time, I saw it. I saw that these big companies are able to do it. I couldn't believe that small and medium-sized companies either couldn't, or it was so complex that they didn't. And so I started calling attorneys. I got on Google and I started calling any kind of a green technology, energy law firms. And I probably I don't know how many attorneys, but it's in, 2 handfuls plus. And I'd get them on the thing. I'd either pay for an hour of their time, or they would say, hey, don't you have to pay? So some of them, they said pay. Some of them, just said, I'll give you an hour. And virtually every one of them said, yes, Cody, it's a big space. Yes, it's a great opportunity. Yes, it's going to grow immensely. Yes, you're in the right spot. But why wouldn't you just go find big companies like what you have in Mexico and go about that way with these 20, 30, 40 million dollar plus companies and just stay in that space? Because there's enough profit in that space, there's enough opportunity in that space, that there's no real reason to go down to the 200 panel system or something like that. And that it really frustrated me at the time, because I thought, well, these are my people. And not only that, is Dr. Douglas can correct me if I'm wrong, but over half the amount of greenhouse gases that are going in the environment are coming from homes and small businesses. And if that's the case, and that's going to have to stop, and they're going to start being, or that's going to have to either slow down or stop. And then there's going to be reports, which there is now on electrical bills, with how clean you are in different parts of the country. That's going to be now something that's going to have to stop. Why can't they be in the opportunity?
Yeah, so if you open up the opportunity for them, all of a sudden there's an extra incentive. All of a sudden they're able to play in the same game. All of a sudden, people who already have it on their homes or small businesses, there's a revenue stream for them. But for the person who hasn't made that decision, now maybe that's an inflection point or a tipping point to say, hey, you know what? Maybe I had to put solar on my house. And so now they're doing it where they wouldn't have done it. And so we get the green revolution. I guess, is that what you're thinking? Is that you're able to expand this green revolution faster because it makes it more accessible to people?
Exactly. And now they cannot be just a part of something that says you stop this, but they're also going to get an incentive on the other side, which is how I believe the world works.
That's fascinating. Well, that's the same thing you're saying. As soon as the government puts tax, I mean, it's the same thing the government does, right? So, solar and green energy, exploded within the United States once the federal government started putting certain tax breaks and incentives and credits associated with it. And everyone's like, all right, let's do this. Same thing with, you take a look back at the beginning when Elon was getting all those tax breaks and people for the cars and and so forth. I mean, that's how you take a revolution inflection point and supercharge it to get mass adoption, right?
You bet. And just to bring us, and I'll give it to Doug, but just to bring us to here, then I was actually at my son's basketball practice, and Carrie Jablonski, she's a attorney, went to Harvard Law, played basketball at Harvard University, and went to Harvard School. So like Harvard D1, all that stuff. I was talking with her about it, and because she was just asking, what are you working on? All that. She just does an amazing job of asking questions, and she was prying me. And I was getting wound up. And she said at the end, she said that you and Doug ought to communicate and talk. I think there's something here. And that, I could tell there was something that was going to happen. And then when I went ahead and met with Doug, then real quick, then at the end of that, I met with Doug and I started understanding who he is and what motivated him. And his skill sets were exactly the opposite of my skill sets. And I appreciate somebody who's so good at the things I'm so bad at. And so that's kind of how Doug and I then became. And then I started realizing his brilliance in making the complex simple and those kinds of things. And that's where we started about a year ago now, or six months, a year ago now, that where we're.
Doug, I want to hear about how you're making this very complex thing simple. But before we do, there's, I think, an important point here I'd like to double click on before we slide past it. Cody, you highlighted here a second ago this chance encounter, a random conversation at a basketball game with an individual where you guys are just Carrie's asking you some questions. And I mean, literally just probably two people either sitting in the stands or standing next to a court, and it leads to a business partnership. I'd like for you to talk a little bit about that the serendipity of the entrepreneurial journey and how you put yourself in the right spot at the right time. For some people would say, well, that was just great luck. but I know you well enough to know that you live your life intentionally and you're prepared. You're a people person. And so you have these types of conversations wherever you go. And it's just a matter of time before one of them where lightning strikes. Can you highlight a little bit of this and your, things that you've learned, or how you would give advice for young people who are following in your footsteps about the importance of just always be ready, always be on your game, talk to everyone you see, and how these serendipitous moments can be life-changing?
I come from the farm, so it's real simple for me to understand what it's like to plant seeds. And you never know what's going to happen to that seed. And so for every conversation I've had that came up like this, I mean, this in my opinion, it was this is a blessing. It's a total gem that I ended up getting a partnership with Dr. Douglas and a handful of the other team that's putting this together. But for every one of those, there was probably 10 of them where it didn't come to fruition, or that maybe they even didn't like the idea. But I think probably the biggest thing I would take from it is you always plant seeds, and the harvest will come over time.
Mm-hmm.
But don't expect those seeds to create a harvest. Like I didn't have a conversation with Carrie hoping to end up doing business with them. That wasn't my conversation with Carrie.
You're just excited about something you were doing, and you're just talking and sharing, and
I was learning from her. I mean, when I realized that, what she had done with her life and what Dr. Douglas had done with her life, I was like, man, this is the kind of people I want to be around, whether we ever do business or not. I want to be their friend. Over time, it correlated a little bit more than that. But I think it's hard when you're passionate about something. The worst thing you can do is keep it inside, because usually what breaks your heart is what you're supposed to fix. And what you're supposed to fix is going to use your words and your relationships and your communication style and your love and your compassion, or else you're not going to be able to fix what broke your heart. So that's why it all kind of funnels down to, like, when you know what you're supposed to fix, then it's very hard. It's like having a wrench and supposed to fix a car and not using it. And it's hard for me if you ask me about certain things, it'll be hard to not have a conversation.
Yeah, I know that about you. Well, Doug, let's pivot back over, take the leap back over to you, and let's talk a little bit about your insight in this space. So you're having this conversation with Cody, and how are you making this? How are you taking the complex and making it simple?
Okay, so I should say the first time I met Cody actually was at a basketball practice, and Cody was sitting on the floor. While most of the dads were standing up criticizing what their sons were doing or what the coach was doing, Cody was 10 feet away sitting on the floor reading some kind of business book. And
was he wearing biker shorts?
I don't remember. but I was thinking to myself, that's a cool dude. I want to get to know that guy, because he's a smart guy, and he's so dedicated to thinking about business and thinking about opportunity. That's the kind of people that I want to be around, so, and then Carrie had the conversation with him after that. And then I definitely knew that I wanted to meet him and have some good conversations. And like Cody said, if for no other reason than just to become a friend of somebody like that. And, if you can forge those friendships in life, to convince a successful person to just have lunch with you or coffee with you once a month or once every other month, you can learn so much from people like that. It's amazing how they look at life, how they look at managing people, where they look for opportunities and things like that. So, immensely powerful. And, you're lucky if you have 3 or 4 people like that in your life, I think. So those are worthwhile friendships to make, not only because you learn a lot from them, but they're just always really cool, interesting people to know. So, I love in the jobs book, going back to the jobs book, that Steve had a vision of what a home computer could be like. It didn't have to be this scary thing. The first Mac they made with their I forget the term, but with the mouse, they made it look like a human head to make it look more approachable, right? This carbon credit market is really kind of nascent still. The government's figuring it out. Internationally, people are trying to figure things out, how we're going to improve the condition of the earth. So there are a lot of entities, regulatory entities, et cetera, involved that just add complexity to complexity, and it's not very well organized. And that's kind of like an old PC running DOS. How does an average person sit down and make use out of the computer? It's really kind of hard to do. And in trying to push this forward and turning it into something that the average homeowner can use and find useful, and small and medium-sized businesses that don't have the resources of big business in the United States can use in a simple way, has always been the goal. And when you read about the carbon credit markets, there's the terminology is used inconsistently. And part of the reason we say green credits is because carbon credits and carbon offsets, et cetera, aren't used in the media the way that they should be very often. And that's not totally true, but very often it is the case. And so we're just trying to, again, simplify, use consistent terminology in our group. The markets are evolving. There are international pressures. There are international players like the United Nations that are sort of leading the way internationally. But then you come down to the federal government in the United States, state governments also are adding to things. And so we had to sift for 9 months or a year. We sifted through the information, trying to make sense of it all, and trying to come up with a clear pathway for our clients to be able to participate in the carbon markets in a way that's transparent to them and easy for them to do.
And so your client would be anybody who has a solar on their home or on their business. Is that right?
Yeah, in any of the states, all 50 states in the U.S., we serve anybody who has a solar installation, again, a residential or a commercial solar installation. We can handle large commercial projects too, easily, but our focus, again, for the reasons that Cody explained a few minutes ago, we're really focused on homeowners and small to medium-sized businesses.
Opening up the opportunity for the average American. What type of challenges did you guys have? I would imagine, every entrepreneurial pursuit that I've been a part of, and certainly the ones that we've read about. You're referencing the famous Walter Isaacson, Steve Jobs book, but he's also recently released one with Elon Musk. And so those are iconic entrepreneurs. And literally the entire time it is just struggle, obstacle, struggle. And it's part of the journey, right? And so for those MBA students who are maybe listening in and preparing for the future struggles that they will have on the businesses that they're going to start, what were some of the struggles and obstacles that you guys have had to overcome, and maybe what did you learn in the process? Maybe this is for both you and Cody. What are some new skill sets or new things that you've learned even right now in this stage of your career that maybe you didn't learn previously?
Number one is everything you read on the internet's not true. And there's a tremendous amount of misinformation, especially about the carbon markets out there. And Cody alluded earlier to talking to a bunch of attorneys to try to figure out how to get this done. And not to disparage attorneys, but there are even
your wife is one of them, so you got to be careful here.
Is one, yeah. But there are people that tell us that this couldn't be done, that it can be done, but it's not worth doing. It can be, why would you mess with homeowners and small businesses? And you start talking to some of these people. I was in on a couple of conversations with Cody, and you know right away with 3 minutes into the conversation whether they really understand the markets or not. And so I think the misinformation was really all the misinformation that's out there is really a big hurdle. And again, having a focus on what the end game is, what the home run is, what is what you're doing is really important there, because it makes you kind of persevere through all the setbacks and difficulties, people telling you that you shouldn't do it or it's not, etc. Is you keep moving the ball forward that way.
Cody, any insight that you'd like to add?
Yeah, I think probably the biggest thing. So I was one of the guys that I mentor with. You're one of them, Bob, and a guy named Pete Oakes. And Pete had told me, he said, I put in, I forget how many thousands of dollars he's put in to try to figure this out, because he's got hydroelectric plants. And he said, I just don't know how long it'll take to figure it out. And he said, you probably ought to limit yourself. But he said, I think you can probably do it if you're just a bulldog enough. And, but he said, don't count on it. And he knew what he was doing to me. He was basically calling me out.
Yeah, he was chumming the waters.
He was chumming the waters. And so the biggest thing I probably learned through this is what you might not really know. And even the most educated, when the rules change in business, usually don't, we're quiet out of the understanding of it. So you think about even the top attorneys in this space didn't even understand the complexity because it was so quiet in its understanding. Mm-hmm. And so finding a way to be not only yourself, be obsessive, but find yourself a group of people that are obsessives is probably the top thing that I could say. Not people that are smart. There's smart people everywhere. In fact, there's more smart people that can't find themselves out of their back porch than there probably is people that just have a regular understanding. But to find people that are obsessive is a whole different thing. And so I think, with Doug, when I realized that Doug was an obsessive, I was like, it doesn't matter what we do, we'll figure this out. And the other team of people, Chris Wake, that has owned a company that had done some carbon credit stuff in the ag space. Kent is a software guy, and he's done in hospitals and stuff. Just to put around a group of obsessives, I would say that's probably the biggest thing. And then also, when you're obsessive, be precise. Okay. Because there's a lot of spaces in this market. We could handle all kinds of stuff. There's hydroelectric, there's wind, there's solar, there's agriculture stuff, and we need to be obsessive, but we also need to be extremely precise and at least get this one right before we started to look at all that. And right now we have hundreds of companies that are trying to partner with us, but we're trying to be extremely precise at the beginning, because there's a lot of beta testing along the way as you get started. There's a lot of problems, there's a lot of software issues, all that kind of stuff. So we're trying to really narrow down our focus. So
there's something that you said that I'm really curious about. You and Doug both talked about how you sought after experts in this space. You specifically sought after experts in this space to seek counsel, to get guidance. And, it's a biblical principle, right? There's a Bible verse that says there's a wisdom in a multitude of counselors. But at the same time that you're seeking counsel and wisdom from very knowledgeable individuals, when a whole slew of these very accomplished people are telling you it's impossible, it won't work, don't do it, somehow at the exact same time you're discounting that guidance and being like, thanks, appreciate it, and pressing on, and finding the one or two wise counselors that were giving you the information that you needed. And we keep going back to the Walter Isaacson's book, but there's both Jobs and Elon Musk. There were many times throughout the course of their career, they were faced with individuals who were career, experts in various domains that were like, it'll never happen. You can't make it work. And both of those guys were like, nope, next. So help me understand how, like you're seeking out wise counselors, but at the same time, you have this emotional and intestinal fortitude to discount when they were saying it can't work. And it just seems like a really odd coincidence there. I'd love for you guys to unpack that as how are you navigating that? Because some people would just be like, I can see some MBA students and be like, dude, I literally went to the number one experts in this career field. These attorneys, they know everything. They said it can't be done. Okay, let me go find something else to do.
I think from my side, I'll let Doug, but from my side of it, there was a simple question and that I couldn't get answered. And the simple question was, if there is credits for individuals that offset, instead of using natural gas and coal that produce a greenhouse gas, if there's individuals that when they offset that, they get a credit, which when they're not using natural gas and coal, they get a credit. Why the heck can't a small solar system get that offset? Help me understand why all these other ones can, these big businesses that can, and these renewable natural gas companies that can, and all these other things that can. Help me understand why it's not that simple. And all the brilliance of minds could not help the simple understanding of that. And so when they couldn't answer that, I knew that there was just the rules, like when these rules had changed and things had happened, there was just nobody that was trying to understand that.
Okay.
And when I couldn't get an answer from $400, $500 an hour attorneys, $600 an hour attorneys, and even more than that. But I said, tell me if I'm wrong about this assumption. And not a one of them could say that we were wrong based on our assumption. So that's really where the gold, in my opinion, and Doug might have a different way of looking at it, but. Yeah,
Doug, what was your vantage point there? Because I liked how you guys are on this path. You're asking the experts, but you're just be like, yeah, I'm not going to listen to what you have to say because it's not right. I mean, you knew you weren't violating the laws of physics. You knew that this was possible. Nobody had actually connected the dots to make it possible for a different type of customer. Right.
Well, I think, in medicine, we go through these phases where the experts think one thing, and so everyone's doing this thing. And then 10 years later, we figure out that was the wrong thing to do for whatever health problem. And this is a better way, so the experts are not infallible, right? They don't always have the same vision that you do. And they are not always going to put the effort into thought to try to see your vision. So I think that there are a lot of things, and many people will tell you what they honestly believe, and that isn't always really the case in reality. But you take everything that the experts say. It doesn't matter what kind of industry you're in, with a grain of salt. And heck, this country was built on people that were willing to buck the system a little bit, right? And to make, to find a better way. And so, I think, it's good talking to all these people because you get to understand their vantage on things. It's always best to understand the vantage point from several different vantage points. But then you kind of have to synthesize what you know against what they're telling you and find a pathway.
Well, let's take a look out 3 to 5 years. Give us some predictions of where you see this green revolution going. I mean, if you have data points or a vision for the overall global landscape, that'd be fantastic. But even then, drilling down here into specifically the United States, in particular this project, what does the future look like? What is the opportunity? And what are you guys hoping to accomplish? What does success look like for you both, for CarbonX Solutions, if you were to look at it 5 years from now?
Cody talked earlier about the electricity consumption of homeowners, homes, and small businesses. Homeowners alone in our country consume about 20%, a little more than 20% of the total electricity produced in our country. If you add what small and medium-sized businesses add, we're probably talking 60 or 70%. So
Wow.
a big chunk of the electricity, our country a couple of years ago established goals of being 50% clean electricity supplied by 2030 and 100% by 2035. That's only a couple of years away now. It's getting close. And so, to me, what would be really satisfying, or what is really satisfying, is to help homeowners participate in the green revolution, and to be able to install solar on their own homes to help the environment. It reduces their electrical costs, et cetera. It's a win-win all the way around. And so with our program, need for obviously, as we approach these goals, the need for green energy is going to increase and increase and increase substantially, exponentially over the next couple of years. And I love the fact that homeowners themselves and small and medium-sized business owners themselves can help with that revolution, and I love to help them financially as well for doing so.
That's fantastic. Cody?
Yeah, I think our big vision is that is exactly what Doug said, is allow them to take part. And I think success to us is helping as many, homes and then businesses, up to a couple $100 million businesses get in this space, create an ongoing income by helping lower greenhouse gases. And just to see that the average person, the average Joe, the average middle class, be able to take part in what I think is going to be, is one of the big three, things that are changing in our world today. So I think by saying that we'd like to help millions of homes and small businesses be a part of this, I don't think that's overstating it. Right now, it's a latent asset that's sitting there that isn't being used, and for a homeowner, a business owner, at no cost to them, for us to walk through, as Carbonex Solutions and the team that Doug is doing, and he is heading up that, and he's the managing partner of that whole division, as they're helping them sift through the complexities. What Doug did for our company, him and his team with Chris and Kent are able to do that for the average person. Sift through those complexities, make it simple, help them get a part of it, start creating a residual income for them. And the neat thing is, as the market, as we're going to lowering our greenhouse gases over time, over between now and 2050, and a lot of the parameters that are there even before then, the value could reach a lot higher numbers for somebody who decides to do this. And the second thing is it allows another reason for somebody to utilize other forms of energy. This is another financial model that maybe solar didn't make sense before. Maybe it was on the edge of making sense because of electrical prices or whatever. And this might tip the scale to help them make the right decision for them and, for our future.
It's an unbelievable goal that the United States has set for itself. If you said 50% by 2030 and 100% by 2035, I mean, where are we at right now? Just like, what is are we 5%? Are we 10%? I mean, where are we at? So within the next couple of years, we need to be 50%?
Yep. We need to be 50% in 6 years, right? And I honestly, I don't know where we are right now.
My guess is that we're probably single digits if we're that, right? Somewhere. I mean, I can't imagine that we're, over 10% clean energy at this point. So, the federal government's going to be behind this in a major way. And Cody, to your point, is anybody who already has this installed on their homes or business, it's a latent asset. So now that will produce an extra revenue income. And then for people who are sitting on the sidelines, not looking at it and be like, well, this is another benefit, and now maybe pushes them over the edge. Be like, all right, I'll jump in and adopt this new technology. We saw the same thing with, electric cars, right? I mean, just at some point there was a tipping point when the incentives got to the point where just now Teslas are ubiquitous around town. I mean, I remember before, like you saw Tesla, it was like seeing a unicorn, right? When they first came out. Now they're everywhere, right? I mean, there's more Teslas in my neighborhood than there used to be in, all of East Tennessee a couple of years ago.
Yeah, and I would say there's that from the advantage side financially, but I also think that there's some safety side of it as well. I was just with a handful of electrical experts. In fact, there's a few of the shows that are going on right now that are their whole focus is on grid reliability.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's a lot of there's some pretty strong statements being made by individuals who understand the reliability of our grid and the dangers of our transformers and all that kind of stuff that we have right now. And there's a safety measure here on this revolution that you might do it for the credit side or the benefit side or the tax side, but I think there's a equal benefit on the safety side and that side of it as well. So
yeah, it's fascinating. I think I heard recently that our electrical grid in the United States needed from coast to coast over $1 trillion investment in the next 5 years just to get it like up to standard. I mean, that's like, all right.
You add all these electric cars and things onto it. 10 years from now, it's going to be in really bad shape.
It's crazy. Well, hey, as we're winding down our time together, I want to certainly we're going to put the website in our show notes and connect there, so anybody who's looking for more information can connect with you guys and follow you on all the various socials and see what you guys are up to. But before we get to kind of closing comments, what are some of the books? I mean, obviously, Dr. Douglas Cleveland, to use your official title. You're right now reading the Steve Jobs book. But what are some other books that you guys have read that have really impacted your career? And Cody, can you remember that book that you were passionately reading on the sidelines when you were wearing your biker shorts? What are your favorite books? I always love hearing entrepreneurs talk about some of their favorite books.
I read a lot with my kids, and there's a book called The Boys in the Boat, which is about the 1932 Olympic rowing team, U.S. Olympic rowing team, and it kind of follows a kid from his secondary education through college and the struggles that he had and the perseverance that he had. And it's a really incredibly inspiring book. And you think a lot about would I have the strength to do what this kid did,
Mm-hmm.
and I read that with my kids. And so I just love I just love the perseverance that the main character had throughout the story.
You're the second entrepreneur recently who's told me about that book and raved about it. The other one was a friend of mine who's been on the podcast. He was a rower at Brown, and he could not stop saying enough good stuff about this book. Bob, this is absolutely phenomenal. So I'm going to have to pick this up.
I got a few. One was recommended by you, Bob, which I thought was a great book. It was The Obstacle is the Way by Ryan Holiday. I would really, if you're an entrepreneur or somebody just likes to kind of push their thinking a little bit, our view of obstacles, our view of pain and punishment, and not moving through that because we felt that is a dangerous concept. And I think that wherever you find, just like when Doug and I, the more we talked to the experts, the more we saw that there was obstacles that could have been like, okay, if they're not doing it, we're not going to do that. If they're okay with it, we're okay with it. And I think the book, The Obstacle is the Way is a good one. And it's very about stoicism and stuff like that. There's also a good book that I read. Maybe it was a year ago. It's just Meditations by Marcus Aurelius.
Yeah.
Really, really good book. I would recommend. I'm reading right now. I've got three books here: Intentional Living by John Maxwell, Seize the Day by Danny Cox. I'm reading the book Elon Musk by Walter Isaacson. That was a gift from you. Inside the carbon thing, if you were looking at some understanding of that, there's a book called Carbon Trade. James Prosper wrote that book. And it talks about all the stuff from the Paris Climate Accord to the Kyoto Treaty. I think I sent it to Doug, you at the beginning. I think I've
read it as well. Yep.
And then the last book that I think will just mess with your mind. Like, one of the things I love to do as an entrepreneur is to take all my assumptions and throw them. Like, if you're going to argue with me, if you think I'm crazy, I want to read your book. Like, Bob gave me a book a long time ago called The Captain Class that did that to me. It just threw all my assumptions that I thought a certain leader was a certain way, and I found out through The Captain Class it was actually a different way, but it didn't. But there's a book called 10X is Easier Than 2X. And my life had been spent doing 2X. Here's this, tweak it a little bit. Here's this, tweak it a little bit. Here's this, tweak it, tweak it, tweak it. And when it was almost like, no, instead of going this way, fly the other way. And that would be a highly recommended book that I would have.
Yeah. You've mentioned a couple that I've read, but you've also mentioned a couple that I have not. So I have to put that on my list. I'll share one with you guys that I just finished up this past weekend. I'm a huge Seth Godin fan, and he has an audio book. And make sure you get the audio book and not the physical copy, because I think it is probably the best audio book I have ever listened to. He does an amazing job of like background kind of music and various things to like really, heighten the senses. But it's called The Bomber Mafia. And as a former Air Force officer, I'm easily intoxicated by historical analysis of World War II and all this type of stuff. But here's why I think it's fascinating for entrepreneurs. Sometimes we get wrapped up in what we're doing. And, at the end of the day, I've had a couple people tell me this, when you're going through a struggle, it's like, Bob, at the end of the day, we're not in Higgins boats storming the beaches of Normandy. Nobody's going to die, right? We're all going to live to see another day. But you realize that there are people and leaders who literally had to make decisions, had to face obstacles where it was life and death. And in the Bomber Mafia, he chronicles the advent of American air power in World War II and doctrine, and how leaders had different viewpoints and doctrine on bombing campaigns in Europe, and then how it changed when we started the war in the Pacific and bombing Tokyo and mainland Japan, and the gut-wrenching details of leaders who had to make decisions where literally lives were in the balance and their best friends were dying, and the fate of the free world, if you will, hangs in the balance. And then he's talking, it's absolutely masterful. And you'll be able to connect the dots to issues of today, right? Conflicts that we have today. But even I was looking at it through the lens of a leader making really difficult decisions. And so if you're interested in history, if you're interested in leadership, I think it's one of the best books. It's the best audiobook I've ever listened to, but really, really impactful. Well, you guys shared a lot of information. I can't thank you enough for the time that you've invested with us today. Well, obviously, it's Carbon X, as in X, like Twitter X Solutions. Is it .com? Is that what Carbon X Solutions? People want to learn more?
It is.
Okay. And are you guys on the socials? Are you on Twitter now, now X?
We are not yet.
Not yet. Okay. Cody, you are, aren't you?
I'm on X and LinkedIn, and Dr. Douglas is on LinkedIn, I think, too, as well.
All right. So people can learn a little more from you.
Douglas is on LinkedIn, I think, too, as well.
All right. So people can learn a little more from you. I'm going
to pivot my last question to something specific for you guys. Let's imagine that you guys have both gone back to your alma maters. So Cody, you're going back to Kansas State. They're bringing back their version of Steve Jobs, Walter Isaacson, the guy who, halfway through just said, I quit. I'm not going to do this. I'm going to go start my thing.
And they've asked you to address their MBA class. and Dr. Douglas Cleveland, maybe this is up in Chicago, maybe this is at Harvard Business School or at Indiana, but you're being asked by one of your alma maters to do the exact same thing. And you're sitting in front of, or standing rather, in front of a class of MBA students, and you're giving them some words of encouragement. So think of all the complexity that we have today in our marketplace. Think of all the various challenges they're entering into, a challenging environment. But I mean, since the dawn of time, life has been challenging. What are some of the words of encouragement, a couple of points that you would share with that class as you're walking out and you're wanting to motivate and inspire them and give them some words of encouragement? So you guys can decide who goes first, but I'd love to hear what you would have to share with that young group of leaders.
All right. Well, I would say probably my biggest thing would be very careful, be very open with the amount of things you listen to, but be careful with who you mentor and let lead you. So take broad swaths of understanding of multiple different spaces. Like I don't believe in going into just particular rabbit holes of Republican and Democrat and independent and green energy versus fossil fuels and all that. Have a broad swath of things you listen to, but be very careful who you allow to be an example to you. And I think if I could say the one thing that has benefited me more than anything else is having individuals in my life that took a vested interest not only in me, but actually creating a gap between them and me that was so obvious to me that I had to raise my level. Like, Bob, the more I've spent time with you, the more that I had to add more books to that thing. So reading, 12 books a year is not enough now because of the example you've set. Now I've got to read 24 or 30. Now I've got to not just read the book, but I got to think through it and I got to understand it. And so give a lot of breadth of understanding about understanding multiple things. Listen to all sides of every equation, but make sure who you allow to be your model, who you allow to be your example, has a big enough gap that you recognize it and you continue to try to fulfill that gap up until you can be that gap for somebody else.
That's great words of wisdom. Dr. Douglas?
I would say throw away your fixed mindset and nurture a growth mindset through your life. You run into a lot of people, in the business world, in medicine, they just want to focus on one thing. Sometimes they don't value the people around them and the thoughts of the people around them as much. I think having a growth mindset will take you farther than you ever thought you could go. The love of learning, figure out how to open your mind and be open to lots of things. Probably your career will take you in paths that you don't expect, but they can be really, really fantastic career paths and very satisfying careers if you're open to them. And on the flip side, I would say that you don't want to involve yourself in an endeavor that you're going to take seriously and you're going to be willing to dig deep in. If you don't believe in it, Cody talked a little bit about this earlier. You got to figure out what would be rewarding to you so that you're a finisher and that you'll stick with it even when the going gets difficult.
Yeah, there's one other one I just thought about too that was probably the Jobs book. Probably helped me recognize as much as anything is in your career. It's probably it is a good idea to find individuals that are exactly opposite of you and partner with them for their strengths. I don't think you would see an Apple computer if Steve Jobs wouldn't have found a Wozniak.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think you would have an Apple if Wozniak wouldn't have found a Steve Jobs.
100%.
Yeah.
And those opposites, it's very hard to have the emotional intelligence to appreciate the differences and really accept and appreciate and really fall in love with how that person is so much different than you. And I think that's one of Carbon X Solutions' advantages, is because I found a guy like Doug that has a lot of the opposite traits that we have, even opposite background, opposite story. And luckily he appreciated those differences as much as I did. And I think that's probably a great way to look at ventures in a lot of different ways.
Wow. Great words. Any other closing comments, anything that we missed today that you'd want to make sure people hear before we sign off?
Just visit carbonxsolutions.com.
There you go. Absolutely. Well, I'll tell you what, you guys, as in your closing comments, Cody, you mentioned surrounding yourself with people that provide a roadmap where there's a little bit of a gap, right? And it motivates you, inspires you to become a better husband, a better father, a better entrepreneur, leader, a better philanthropist, right? And I know, having been a friend of yours for many, many years, that you have done that for so many people by the life that you live and the example that you live, not only in your community there in Wichita, Kansas, but also around the country. And so I just want to say thank you for that. And you've also done that in my life as well. Dr. Douglas Cleveland, you mentioned about having a growth mindset and surrounding yourself with people with a growth mindset. And I've seen that in you, and I appreciate you being willing to share that growth mindset with our listeners this afternoon, motivating and inspiring not only young people, right? So I've got my kids have their friends that listen to this podcast, and they're in various stages of their entrepreneurial career, their educational journey. But we also have a lot of leaders all over the world who listen to this, seasoned CEOs and executives in the Middle East, Europe, Africa, here in the United States, and so appreciate you sharing your journey, what you've learned. And sometimes can be one or two little snippets here, a little word of encouragement or a little insight that can really have an impact in people's lives. And I know both of you guys are super busy, so many things going on, but I just want to say thank you for taking a couple minutes of your time to be with us and all of our listeners around the globe. So thank you so much.
Thanks for having us, Bob.
Thanks, Bob.
Absolutely. Today's episode was engineered by Mitch White with graphic and marketing by my incredible daughter, Tristan White. Special thanks to Cody and Doug for investing time to share with our listeners their story and drive to make the world a cleaner and greener place while also helping home and business owners. Make sure to subscribe on Apple Podcast, or if you're an Android user, check us out on Spotify or wherever you go to listen to your favorite pods. If you like the show, please share it with a friend and give us a review. That is always appreciated. Thank you for spending time with us today, and we look forward to spending more time with you next week.